The man sitting on the concrete step outside ShopRite on Osu Oxford Street in Accra had been there since 6:47 that morning. He wore a gray shirt with a tear along the left sleeve. His trousers were brown at the hem from 2 days of walking in them. His shoes, old Dunlop sandals, the kind sold in lots of 3 at Makola Market for 12 cedis, had been split at the toe strap and held together with a strip of black electrical tape. He held a dented tin cup between his palms, and he did not look up when people passed. He did not say anything. He simply sat and breathed and waited. At 9:14 a.m., a silver Mercedes S-Class pulled up across the road. The woman who stepped out of it was wearing a cream Ankara blouse and carrying a small Gucci bag she had bought herself with the allowance her husband gave her in March. Her name was Nana Adwoa Owusu Boateng. She was 37 years old. She had been married to Kolade Owusu Boateng for 11 years. She had never, in 11 years, been given a reason to doubt the life she was living. She crossed the street without looking at the man on the step. She did not know who he was. He already knew exactly what she was about to do. Nana Adwoa had not always worn cream Ankara and carried Italian handbags. She had grown up in Dansamon, the third of 5 children, in a house where the electricity went out on the 23rd of every month, without exception, because her mother Grace refused to borrow money for bills. Not from pride, from calculation. Grace Adwoa had done the arithmetic every first of the month at the kitchen table with the same pencil stub she sharpened with a paring knife. And she had determined, years before Nana was old enough to understand what she was watching, that debt was more expensive than inconvenience. So the electricity went out, and the family lit candles and did their homework by candlelight, and nobody was permitted to complain about it. Because Grace Adwoa had decided, and Grace Adwoa's decisions were final. She had pressed her children's school uniforms every morning with a charcoal iron she had owned for 19 years, its base worn smooth from 2 decades of use. She told them that how you present yourself to the world is the only thing the world cannot take from you. Nana had heard this so many times she had stopped hearing it, until she was 22 and working the front counter at a small printing company on Kaneshi Road for 280 cedis a month, pressing her one good blouse every morning with the iron her mother had given her when she left home. She remembered that blouse precisely, a pale blue cotton one she had bought at the Dansuman Junction Market for 6 cedis 50 when she was 19. She had kept it carefully enough that by the time she wore it to her first day at the printing company, 3 years later, it still lay flat at the collar. She wore it every Monday and every Wednesday, washing it by hand on Tuesday nights and Friday nights, hanging it from the curtain rod to dry so the shape would hold. 4 blouses total, rotated without complaint. The discipline of this, the refusal to let scarcity become an excuse for disorder, was not something Nana could have named at 22. She simply did what she had been shown to do. She was 25 when she met Kolade at a colleague's wedding in East Legon. He was quiet in a way she had not expected from a man of his appearance. The suit was clearly expensive, but he sat near the back, not the front, and he did not speak until someone spoke to him first. His hands were large, and he held his glass of water with both of them. He had a habit of going very still when he was listening, the kind of stillness that made you feel heard in a way that was slightly unusual. He had asked her what she did, and she told him without softening it. She was a print coordinator. She was saving for a HND program in business administration. She had 34 Ghana cedis in her account at the moment they were speaking, plus 70 more in the envelope her mother had tucked into her clutch bag before she left the house. Savings Grace had set aside since February for Nana's birthday, given 3 weeks early, because Grace had heard the venue was East Legon, and she did not want her daughter to be short of anything. He had not laughed. He had asked her what she wanted to study. She told him, finance and administration. She wanted to understand how money moved, not to have more of it, but to understand why people who had none of it made the decisions they made. She had watched her mother count money at the kitchen table every first of the month for as long as she could remember. She had watched the careful allocation, this for school fees, this for kerosene, this for the landlord, this remainder for everything else. She wanted to understand the system that made that arithmetic necessary. He had looked at her for a long moment and then said, "That is an interesting reason to study finance." They were married 2 years later. She wore a dress her mother helped sew from 3 yards of white lace and 1 yard of ivory organza. Grace pressed it the morning of the wedding with the charcoal iron she had had for 22 years. By the time Nana was 33, Kolade's company, Owusu Boateng Commodities, which handled agribusiness contracts across 5 West African countries, had offices in Accra, Abidjan, and Lagos. He kept a close staff of 11. He was 43 years old and had never, as far as anyone knew, raised his voice at an employee. He drove himself to work in a Toyota Land Cruiser with 214,000 km on the dashboard that he refused to replace because, he said, a man who gets rid of things the moment they show wear does not understand what loyalty costs. Nana ran the household. She ran it the way Grace had run the house in Danceman, with precision and no waste. She kept a small green exercise book she had started in the first year of their marriage, in which she recorded every household expense, down to the kerosene and the laundry detergent, and the 40 cedis for Kwame's Thursday mathematics tutoring. Not because Kolade required it. He had never asked to see it. She kept it because her mother had kept one, and because there was a specific kind of peace that came from knowing exactly where every cedi had gone. The book was 11 volumes now. She stored the old ones in a cardboard box on the left side of the wardrobe, labeled on the spine in her careful handwriting by year. She managed Kwame's school arrangements entirely. Uniforms ordered in June before the August price increases. Medical appointments scheduled at the start of each term. His Tuesday afternoon tutoring with the Liberian woman on Osu Boundary Road who charged 40 cedis an hour, and whom Nana had found by asking every parent she knew at the school gate for 3 weeks, until someone gave her a name. She attended every school event. She had missed 2 in 4 years, once for a funeral in Kumasi, and once because Kwame himself had asked her not to come to a particular sports day because he was embarrassed by how loudly she cheered. Nana had respected this without comment and felt, privately, a small, uncomplicated sadness she told to nobody except Grace on the telephone that evening, who had laughed until she coughed and said, "That is your father's personality coming out in him. He will outgrow it." She knew she was loved. She knew the house in Cantonments was built for her. She knew the car was chosen because she had mentioned once, in passing, that she liked the color silver. She knew all of this the way you know something when you have lived inside it long enough that it no longer presents itself as a gift. It simply becomes the shape of your life. What she did not know was that 6 weeks ago, Kolade's sister Adeze had called him from London at 11:52 on a Wednesday night and said, "Quietly, brother, I need to tell you something about your wife." Adeze had been precise about it. She said she was not trying to cause trouble. She had heard it from someone who had been at a gathering in London in February. A charity dinner in Mayfair, she thought, though she was not certain. A woman at the table had recently lost her job, and Nana, according to this account, had said something that indicated she believed the woman had been careless with her career. The words Adayeze repeated were not words Nana had said to Adayeze directly. They had traveled through at least 2 people before they reached her. She acknowledged this. But they had sat with her for 6 weeks, and she had finally decided her brother deserved to know. Kolade had sat with the phone against his ear for 4 minutes after Adeze stopped speaking. He had not asked Nana about it. He lay in the dark that night beside his wife and listened to her breathe and tried to find the woman Adeze had described in 11 years of evidence. The woman who had brought his sister Constance soup every week for 3 months after Constance's operation in 2019. The woman who had stayed on the telephone with his driver's wife for 2 hours when his driver was in a road accident on the Tema motorway and the wife was alone at home and frightened. The woman who kept 11 green exercise books of household accounts nobody had asked for, who ordered Kwame's school uniforms in June so he would not be caught short in September, who got up at 5:30 on the mornings she knew Kolade had early calls to make sure there was tea on the counter. He could not find the woman Adeze described. But the failure to find her was not proof that she was not there. He had built 11 years of commodities contracts on the distinction between accusation and evidence. He would find the evidence himself, or he would not find it, and that too would be its own answer. The plan took 3 weeks to arrange. He told no one on his staff except Tobena, who had worked for him for 9 years and who had seen him through a warehouse fire in Tema that destroyed 200,000 cedis of product in 2021. Through a difficult year when their second child did not survive past the 3rd month, and Kolade had sat in his office for 11 days without being able to sign a single document. Tobena had handled the 11 days without being asked. He was that kind of man. Kolade explained what he needed. Tobena had listened without expression and then said, "I will handle the clothes." He did. He sourced the gray shirt, the brown trousers, the split-toed sandals, and the tin cup from 3 different stalls at Circle, spending 43 cedis total. He drove them to Kolade's office in a plastic carrier bag and set them on the desk without comment. Kolade chose Thursday because Thursday was the day Nana drove herself to Osu for the weekly groceries. She had a routine he knew in detail. ShopRite for the dry goods, then the tomato cellar on the corner of Oxford and Oman Road, then the cold store 2 buildings down for fish. She was always done by 11:30 and home by noon. He arrived at 6:47 and positioned himself on the step with the tin cup between his palms. He wore the scratched sunglasses of his university days, left lens cracked at the corner, bridge-taped, so that if she came close enough, there would be uncertainty before recognition. He had not shaved in 8 days. He had left his wedding ring at the office. He had a newspaper folded across his knee that he did not read. By 8 in a row, 12 people had passed. 3 had looked at him. 1 had dropped a coin without breaking stride, a boy of perhaps 14 in a secondary school uniform who did not glance down as he gave it, who had simply opened his palm over the cup and kept walking. The coin made almost no sound landing. Kolade watched the boy go and thought about this. By 9:00, the street was fully alive. The cold store had opened its shutter with a sound like a struck drum. The tomato seller was arranging her trays with the efficiency of a woman who had done this same sequence for perhaps 20 years. The smell of kelawele from a cart near the junction moved with the wind, spiced and warm, arriving before you had decided whether you were hungry. 2 men in reflective vests ate rice from styrofoam containers on the far curb. A motorbike waited at the junction with its engine running. A woman with a basket on her head moved through the space between parked cars without slowing. At 9:14, the silver Mercedes appeared from the direction of the ring road. Kolade watched his wife cross the road. He watched her walk past him without slowing, not with the deliberate avoidance of someone who had noticed and chosen not to engage, but with the natural inattention of someone whose mind was already composing the grocery list, already calculating how much tomato paste she needed for the stew on Friday. He watched her go through the automatic doors. He watched the doors close. He sat for 40 minutes. During those 40 minutes, he watched the street with a particular attention he had not applied to anything in years. He watched a man in a business suit walk around the far edge of the pavement to avoid passing close to him. He watched a market woman stop, look into his cup, say something quiet in Twi, then continue on. He watched two children argue over a sachet of pure water in front of the cold store until one of them tore it, and the water went onto the pavement, and they both stopped arguing and stared at the water for a moment, and then walked away. He watched a taxi driver park half on the curb, get out, drink an entire sachet of Voltic water in 4 seconds, crush the bag flat between his palms, and put it in his pocket. Nobody looked at him twice. He understood, for the first time with his body rather than his mind, what it meant to be invisible. He had read about it. He had said he understood it. He had made donations to organizations that addressed it. He had been sitting on a concrete step on Osu Oxford Street for 2 hours and 14 minutes, and not one person had spoken to him, looked at him for more than a fraction of a second, or demonstrated in any way that they registered his presence as the presence of a human being who might have a name and a history and a reason for being there. The boy in the school uniform had not looked at him either, but the boy had given him a coin. She came out at 9:58 with 2 bags, one in each hand, and walked back toward the car without looking at him. He stood up then, which was not part of the plan. He was not sure why he stood up. He would think about this later. He stood up and he said, quietly, "Please." Nana stopped. She turned around. She looked at him the way you look at something you were not expecting. He could not read her expression from behind the scratched lenses. She was 4 feet away from him, and she was looking at him, and he felt something he had not felt since he was 19 years old and waiting outside a bank in Kumasi for a loan officer who did not come. He felt the specific smallness of being seen as nothing. She set both bags down on the pavement. She reached into the Gucci bag, not the outer pocket but the inner one, and he heard the sound of a zip. She came out with her wallet. She opened it. She took out a note. Not a small note. He could see it was green. It was a 50 CD note. She held it toward him. He did not take it. She stepped closer. She held it out again. She said, "Take it, please." He still did not move. She bent down, set it in the cup, and then she did something he had not prepared himself for. She looked at him, at his face, directly, not at the beard or the torn shirt or the sandals held together with electrical tape. And she said, "Do you have somewhere to eat today? If this story is already doing something to you, stay with me. Because what happens in the next few minutes is something neither of them will forget for the rest of their lives." He said, carefully no. She was quiet for a moment. She reached back into her bag and took out a second note. Another 50. She put that one in the cup too. She said, "There's a chop bar on Oman Road, the one with the blue awning. Tell Madam Abina at the counter that Nana sent you. She'll give you something hot." He could not speak. She picked up both grocery bags. She took 3 steps toward the car, and then she stopped again. She came back. She reached into one of the grocery bags and took out a small packet of fan yogo, the kind her son Kwame liked, and she put that in the cup too. She said nothing else. She walked to the car, put the bags in the boot, got in, and drove away. Kolade stood on the step outside ShopRite on Osu Oxford Street for 6 minutes. He did not count the 6 minutes. Tobena, watching from the car parked across the junction, counted them. Later, he would tell Kolade it was 6 minutes. Kolade would say it felt like longer. He took the scratched sunglasses off. He looked at what was in the cup. 100 sedis and a fan yogo. He called Tobena and said, quietly, "Take me home." In the car, Tobena did not speak first. He drove. The city moved past the windows, the Okada riders threading the traffic at the Kwame and Nkrumah Circle interchange, the hawkers at the junctions with ice water and mobile phone credit, the sky above Accra that particular dense white it gets, before the afternoon harmattan comes in from the north. Kolade sat in the back seat with his hands flat on his thighs. At the junction near the Tema motorway on ramp, he said, "She gave me 100 cedis." Tobena said, "Yes, and a fan yogo." "Yes, and she told me where to eat. She gave me a name, the name of a person at a chop bar on Oman Road who would give a stranger something hot." He looked at his hands. She did not think about it. She did not weigh it. She just told me who to go to. Tobena kept his eyes on the road. After a moment he said, "She is that kind of woman, sir." They drove the rest of the way in silence, not the silence of people who have nothing to say, but the silence of two people who have just understood the same thing at the same time and do not need to narrate it. Kolade arrived home an hour before Nana. He stood in the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror for a long time, shaved now, clean, in the gray linen shirt she had given him for his birthday in January. He tried to locate the man who had spent 3 weeks planning a test for his wife. He found him easily enough. He did not particularly like what he found. He went to the kitchen and sat at the table to wait. She came in at 12:07. She set the grocery bags on the counter without looking at him. She took out the ShopRite receipt, folded it once, and put it on the counter beside the bags the way she always did before she unpacked, because she liked to have the receipt where she could check it against what she'd bought. Then she turned around. She looked at him for a long time without speaking. Outside, a motorbike passed on the road. The refrigerator made its steady hum. The ceiling fan in the corridor turned at its slow afternoon pace. "You were there this morning," she said. It was not a question. He said yes. She turned back to the counter and began unpacking the groceries with the same deliberate care she always brought to this. Dry goods to the upper shelf, tins toward the back, the ceramic bowl her father had given them as a house gift waiting for the tomatoes near the window. She did not rush. She did not set anything down harder than she needed to. Her hands moved with the ordinary precision of a woman who has unpacked groceries every Thursday for 11 years and sees no reason, even now, to do it any differently. He watched her hands. 3 minutes passed. Then she said, without turning around, "Your sister called me." In February. From London. He went completely still. "She wanted to know what kind of woman I was," Nana said. She placed the last tin on the shelf. Tuna. She always put the tuna at the back because Kolade liked to find it unexpectedly, and then folded the ShopRite bag into a neat square and put it in the drawer the way she always did. She turned around. Her face was calm, completely calm. She asked if I was the kind of woman who would still care about a man if he lost everything, if I was the kind of woman who would stay. She met his eyes. I told her I did not know how to answer a question like that. I told her I would have to show her. He looked at his wife's hands on the table, hands that had kept 11 green exercise books of household accounts nobody had asked for. Hands that had reached into a leather handbag on a pavement in Osu and given a man an electrical tape, sandals every 50 cedi note in her wallet, and a fan yogo from the grocery bag. Without hesitation, without ceremony, as though it were simply the obvious thing to do. Hands that had been pressed and folded around her at 11 years old, while her mother taught her that how you present yourself to the world is the only thing it cannot take from you. He said, "I owe you an apology." She said, "You owe me an honest conversation." She pulled out the chair across from him, sat down, and folded her hands on the table. Not crossed arms. folded hands, the posture of someone who is ready to listen. Start talking. He talked for 45 minutes. He told her about a Daisy's call at 11:52 on the Wednesday night. He told her about the 4 minutes of silence afterward. He told her about lying in the dark beside her that night, trying to find the woman Adese had described, and not finding her, and deciding that was not proof enough. He told her about the 3 weeks of planning, the 43 setties Tobena had spent at Circle, the sandals, the 8 days without shaving, the wedding ring left at the office. He told her about arriving at 6:47 and the boy in the school uniform who dropped a coin without looking. He told her about the 40 minutes of watching people walk past without registering him. He told her about standing up when she came out, which was not part of the plan, and saying please and not being able to explain why. He told her what it had felt like to stand there. She listened without interrupting, without looking away, without the micro-expressions of judgment or hurt that he had half expected. She simply let him finish. When he was done, she said, "You want to know something?" He said, "Yes." She said, "I did not recognize you. Not from the beard or the clothes or the glasses." She paused. "I recognized you from how you were sitting. Shoulders forward, both hands wrapped around the cup the way you hold a glass in every hospital waiting room we have ever been in, like if you hold it tight enough, the waiting will end faster." She looked at him steadily. "I didn't know it was you. But even if I had, I need you to understand that it would not have changed what I did." He put his hand over hers on the table. He said, "I know." She said, "Good." She held his gaze for one more moment, the clear, level look of a woman who has always known who she is and has simply been waiting, with patience, for the person across from her to arrive at the same knowledge. Then she stood up and put the kettle on. She made 2 cups of ginger tea. She set one in front of him without asking if he wanted it. She sat back down. 3 weeks after that Thursday, Kolade called Adese. The call lasted 22 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He told her what the test had been and what the result was. He told her that what she had passed along was not evidence. It was a second-hand account that had traveled too far from its source. He told her he had acted on it badly, and that he was telling her so because she was his sister and she deserved the same honesty he was trying to rebuild at home. Adese was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I was wrong to call you." He said, "You were worried about me. I understand the difference." She said, "Your wife is a good woman, Kolade." He said, "I know. I have known for 11 years. I simply forgot to keep knowing it." It took Adese 4 more months before she called Nana directly. When she did, Nana answered on the second ring. They talked for an hour and 17 minutes. Kolade never asked what was said. He did not need to. In May, Kolade established a fund through Owusu Boatung Commodities for street vendors and small traders in Accra's central markets, who had been cut off by the Tema motorway road construction. 60,000 cedis, administered quietly through the Market Traders Association over 8 weeks, in amounts ranging from 300 cedis to 2,000, calibrated to each applicant's demonstrated loss. No announcement. No press. When Tobena delivered the final distribution report, Kolade read through every line. Then he signed the authorization form and handed it back. He said, "Is there a chop bar on Oman Road, one with a blue awning?" Tobena said, "Madame Abena's place." "Yes," Kolade said, "add it to the list." The night before the fund closed, Kolade sat on the back veranda with a glass of water and looked at the city. Nana came out and sat beside him. The ring road carried its faint sound over the wall. The air smelled of red earth and rain that had fallen 3 hours earlier. After a while, Nana said. "What are you thinking about?" He said, "That boy, the one in the school uniform who dropped the coin without looking." She said, "What about him?" He said, "He didn't look to see whether I deserved it. He just gave it." He was quiet for a moment. "I have spent my entire career in rooms where every decision was made by calculating whether the other person had earned something, whether the risk was justified." He looked at his hands. A 14-year-old boy walked past a man on a step and gave him a coin without calculating any of it. Nana said, "So did I." He said, "So did you." She put her hand on his arm. They sat together until the ring road went quiet and Accra found its 1:00 a.m. stillness, and neither of them had any reason to be anywhere other than exactly where they were. What Kolade thought he was doing on that Thursday morning was testing his wife. What he understood before noon was that the only thing under examination had been himself. He had spent 11 years building a company on the principle that evidence matters more than accusation. He had walked into a Circle Market stall and bought torn clothes to test a woman who had given him 11 years of evidence, daily, unremarkable, unhesitating. He had treated the one person who knew him well enough to recognize him by how he held a cup, not by what he wore or what he owned, but by how he held himself when he was waiting for something difficult, as though she were a contract not yet verified. You can build a great many things with calculation. Companies, contracts, commodity routes across 5 countries. But the people standing nearest to you cannot be governed by calculation. They can only be held by the same thing they are offering you, which is trust given before the proof arrives. There is a particular kind of caution that is not caution at all. It is a refusal to believe what you have already been shown, dressed in the language of prudence. And that refusal costs more than any risk you thought you were avoiding. What Nana carried into that street was not exceptional. It was ordinary in the way that true things are ordinary, not dramatic, not announced. Simply present, she saw a man on a step. She stopped. She gave what she had. She left behind the name of someone who would help. This is what it looks like when a person has not forgotten who they are. And here is what I want to ask you before you go. The person who has been quietly holding your life together while you were busy building everything else, if they were standing in front of you right now, would you recognize them? Not by what they carry or what they wear, but by how they hold themselves when the weight is heavy and nobody is watching? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.